Here we're going to discuss the number of solutions for a linear equation. So how many solutions does a linear equation have? So the first type of equation is a conditional equation. Suppose we have x plus 3 equals 2. This equation works or is valid or is legitimate only when x equals -1. So it works only if I plug in x equals -1. So -1 in for x plus 3 equals 2. 3 minus 1 is 2, so 2 equals 2. So if I plug in x equals -1, the equation works. And x equals -1 is one solution to the equation x plus 3 equals 2. And there cannot be any other number that satisfies this equation. So there's exactly one solution to this conditional equation. So if you plug in a 0, for example, 0 plus 3 equals 2. So 3 equals 2, that's not a true statement. So therefore 0, x equals 0 cannot be a solution. So this equation has exactly one solution. Now let's look at this. This is called an identity. So x plus 1 equals 2x plus 1. Okay, so x plus 1 equals 2x plus 1 minus x. So we rearrange the terms. So we write it as 2x minus x. So we combine this term and this term. They're called like terms. 2x minus x plus 1. So we have on the left x plus 1 equals 2x minus x, which is x plus 1. Now, if you're trying to solve for x, we isolate x on one side of the equation, which means we get rid of x on the other side. So I subtract x to get rid of the x on the right side. So therefore, I subtract x on the left as well. So on the left side, we have x plus 1 minus x equals x minus x is 0 plus 1. So x plus 1 minus x is equal to 0. 0 plus 1 equals 0 plus 1. 1 equals 1. It's a true statement. So we were not able to solve and find an exact value of x. So let's see what works. If I plug in x equals 0, so 0 plus 1 equals 2 times 0 plus 1 minus 0. When we simplify both sides, we get 1 equals 1. So 0 is a solution. So we were not able to find exactly one solution, but 0 seems to be a solution. Now, if I plug in a 0.5, 0.5 in for x plus 1 equals 2 times x. So that's 2 times 0.5 plus 1 minus 0.5. So plus 1 minus 0.5. So what I did was I plugged in 0.5 on both sides of the equation. So 1.5 on the left is equal to 2 times 0.5. 2 times 0.5 is 1. Plus 1 minus 0.5, which is equal to 1.5 on the left, equals 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 minus 0.5 is 1.5. So that also works. So no matter what I plug into this equation, it is going to work. So which means all real numbers are solutions to this equation. What does that mean? If I plug in x equals radical 2, it's going to work. If I plug in 0.5, it's going to work. If I plug in a 1/8, it's going to work. If I plug in a negative 55.5, it's going to work. No matter what real number I plug in to this equation, it's going to work, which means that this equation has infinitely many solutions. It's called an identity. If it's an identity, you can recognize it by trying to first solve it, and you will not be able to get exactly one value of x. However, you get an equation that is true. So 1 equals 1, for example, or 5 equals 5, or 0 equals 0. All these are true. Even though you were not able to solve for x, you get an equation that is valid. So that tells us that this equation has infinitely many solutions. So that's called an identity. It's a linear equation with infinitely many solutions. Now let's see what a contradiction is. Suppose I have an equation. This looks like a linear equation, so it's x to the 1. Now if I try to solve this equation, what I'll have to do next is to get rid of the x on the right side, so we can isolate all the x's on the left. So I subtract x out. Okay, so when I subtract x out on the left, I need to do exactly the same on the other side. So on the right and on the left, I subtract x. So x minus x on the right side equals 0, plus 2. The 1 on the left, x minus x is equal to 0. So when I simplify it, I get 1 equals 2. So that is a contradiction, which means that is a false statement. It can never be true. So no matter what I plug into this equation, it is never going to be true. Suppose I plug in a 5. 5 plus 1 equals, I'm sorry, that's a 2. 5 plus 2. So 7 on the right, 6 on the left. 6 equals 7, not true. So no matter what number I plug into this equation, I'm never going to get a valid equation, which means it is a contradiction. This type of equation has no solutions. So let's look at the 3 types of linear equations. One, which is called a conditional equation, it has exactly one solution. Exactly one solution. Next, an identity, which has infinitely many solutions. It'll work for any value that you plug in. Infinitely many solutions. That's what this is, an identity. Infinitely many solutions. Okay. And how do we recognize an identity? When we try to solve for x, we get something like a 1 equals 1 or a 5 equals 5 or a 0 equals 0. That's when we know that it's an identity and it has infinitely many solutions. How do we know that it's a contradiction, which means it has no solutions? When we try to solve it and we get something like 1 equals 2 or 6 equals 7, which can never ever be true, which means no matter what number we plug in to the equation, it's never going to work, which means it has absolutely no solution. So it's either exactly one solution or infinitely many solutions in the case of an identity, or no solutions in the case of a contradiction.